Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to this session, right at the time of the lunch. I really hate to do this job at the time of lunch, but unfortunately, our session is timed at 1 o'clock, exactly the same time of the lunch. And let's start with this session on the green transition. And as a lot of you are well aware, the AIIB was set with sustainability as the founding rock of the institution. And it's at the very heart of the bank's own mission. And green transition is one of the paths that could help us reach the eventual mission. And today, we are most glad to have with us a wonderful panel of experts from a wide variety of background, from private institution, from UN agency, from international accounting standard setting bodies, and also from our peer institution, EBRD, and our own colleagues. And without further ado, let me invite our opening speech speaker, Mr. Alberto Nino. And Alberto is the general counsel of the bank, and he is our member of the executive committee in the bank. And Alberto, before general counsel, he was actually heading the very core of the sustainability function in the bank. He was the director general of the operational service department, the first form of the SFD, which is the current sustainability and fiduciary solution department. And shortly after creating the operational service department, Alberto took on the leadership in the bank's legal department. He is now our general counsel. And before joining AIIB, Alberto was a deputy general counsel for operations in World Bank Group. So, Alberto.
Good afternoon, and it's a terrific panel, and perhaps it's going to be very difficult for ANA to, moderate all these stars. So thank God I only have this introduction, and then I can sit and learn, because everyone that will participate, starting with our keynote speaker, very, very, very qualified and with a lot of experience. And on that note, I think it's important to underscore that below this title, resilience and climate and for all, I think there's a real work being done by everybody in this room. And everybody wants to do it better. And that's why I believe why we are here, to learn, to improve, to correct, to self-correct, and to hear a variety of stakeholders on this issue. So, due to the growing global challenges, the urgency to transition to green, sustainable future is a key subject to all of us. As a matter of fact, every day at the AIIB, we talk about that, ways of boosting that. Infrastructure we build today will define our societies for decades to come, and it's crucial that we lay solid foundations for a resilient and sustainable future. The green transition is more than a trend. It is critical, it is a necessity. To mitigate climate change, better adapt to the impacts of climate change, protect our ecosystems, and secure a sustainable future, we must rethink how we design, finance, operate infrastructure projects. Such a transition involves adopting new technologies and ensuring that our infrastructure can withstand the increasingly severe impacts of climate change. In recent years, we've seen a growing commitment from governments, business, and multilateral development organizations to prioritize green infrastructure. I think there's no question now that this is the priority. I think the question now is how to do it and how to do it right. Who will listen? Let's listen everyone. And let's get that kind of experience to enhance our projects, every stakeholder. For this, we need to better understand the needs of the most vulnerable, the developing countries and the least developed countries, that in the Articles of Agreement of AIIB focus and privileges the needs of the less developing countries. And we need to do better in that regard. Our efforts should address their needs and assist them in turning their needs into successfully implemented projects. To boost the green transition and enhance infrastructure resilience, we must ensure implementation of climate adaptation and mitigation, high-level strategies, and action plans on the ground. One thing that I hear a lot is that the AIIB is a project bank, but a project does not operate in isolation. We have to have the right policies. We must mobilize finance for green infrastructure, including innovative financing models that make green projects more attractive and accessible, stimulate a strong policy frameworks and regulatory support to drive the green transition, stimulate markets to adopt new technologies and innovative solutions, from smart grids to sustainable building materials, from energy efficient to renewable energy. Is the building back better that we hear so much. As we pursue the green transition, it is vital to ensure that development is all-inclusive. Hence, we must engage with a wide variety of stakeholders at every level to ensure that projects are designed and built with strong social, environmental, and climate justice impetus. As no single entity can achieve the green transition alone, and we recognize that at AIIB, collaboration is essential. It will make us succeed or fail. Partnerships help in unlocking new opportunities, sharing resources and knowledge, and driving the implementation of our ideas. Today's session will delve into these elements and more, exploring how we can join forces to help in acceleration of the green transition and enhancing the resilience of infrastructure projects. We will hear from experts who are leading the way in this field, sharing their insights and experiences on what it takes to build the infrastructure of the future. Thank you very much, and I very much look forward to our discussion. Jenny.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alberto. Right. Next, I would like to invite Sarah Trerup to come to and speak on the topic. And Sarah Trerup is the head of technology transitions and system innovation at UNEP's Copenhagen Climate Center. Since joining UNEP in 2005, Sarah worked with international organizations and governments to promote the development, transfer, and use of environmentally sound technologies. She leads the GEF-funded Global Technology Needs Assessment Project, which has supported more than 100 developing countries in identifying and assessing their climate technology needs. Sarah, pleased to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure being here today, and we really appreciate the opportunity given by the bank and the organizers of this event for UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center to share our experiences and try to set a bit of the landscape for the panel discussion we'll hear after my presentation. Let me see if the clicker works. Yes, I believe so. Good. So we have just heard from our opening remarks how there is an urgency to address climate change and the need for a green transition. We know that it's a global crisis, there's no doubt about that, and that half of the world's total GDP is moderately or highly depending on nature. So we need to understand the urgency of the green transition and to addressing climate change and the role of sustainable infrastructure in reducing its impacts. Speaking from the experience from the last 15 years in supporting developing countries in identifying, articulating their needs for adaptation and mitigation, in particular for technologies, but as we understand technologies, these are embedded within infrastructure and other initiatives. We have seen that 15 years ago, around 24% of priorities were focused on adaptation. And this has changed over the years, as we now see that around 55% are actually prioritized within adaptation compared to mitigation of initiatives prioritized and put forward by governments under the UNFCCC, the UN Climate Change Framework. We also see in these priorities and the needs of developing countries that infrastructure plays a significant role. In particular, this is also in the water sector, in coastal protection, in housing sectors, you could say, both in terms of mitigation and adaptation to climate, but also in the agricultural sector. We also know that finance is a main driver, and this is identified by all countries without exception that we work with as a main challenge in overcoming implementation and accelerating implementation of sustainable infrastructure. If I go to the next slide. Thank you. This is 2 slides. Let me see if I can change it. Yes, thank you so much. So looking at the key trends within the area of green transition and enhancing resilience of infrastructure, I'd like to highlight a few areas. Of course, we're here to speak about climate resilient infrastructure, both in terms of the design and the construction of infrastructure that can resist the higher variability, the rise in extreme events. And it includes, for example, flood-resistant roads, climate proofing of buildings, resilience of water supply systems, etc. So we need to think differently when we plan and construct. We also need to integrate considerations of mitigation. Even we speak here about resilience and adaptation, it's increasingly important to rethink and integrate, synergize between mitigation and adaptation. So we integrate such as renewable energy measures when we plan larger adaptation projects as well. We also know that it's a highly valid resource that we have the nature-based solutions. For example, in increasing resilience to heat in cities. Also in coastal protection measures and other areas. Finally, it's also highly important to consider the needs of the vulnerable countries and involving communities through the governments in identifying, articulating the needs, ensuring that the stakeholders are committed all the way through. As we have seen, it provides a much more sustainable implementation process and sustainability in the longer term. Public-private partnerships is nothing new, but as relevant as it has been before. We work with governments, with communities, and with private companies that can drive large-scale infrastructure projects. And finally, innovative blended finance mechanisms, and I think we'll hear some examples of that later on. But again, this is really what we're looking for and seeing the key trends within. Coming to the current challenges. Again, coming back to the funding and investment. It's proven difficult to ensure investments in adaptation, in resilient infrastructure, as it tends to be more expensive having a climate resilient road than a business as normal road, at least if you look in the shorter term. And there is a limited experience with these investments. And all this also comes to the uncertainty and the lack of data and information, both in terms of climate projections, but also on the impacts, both on the infrastructure itself and on communities, and how do we measure the impacts of climate resilient infrastructure. From the experience working with many governments in the more than 100 developing countries, we know that it's also a challenge to put in place the adequate regulatory frameworks and policies to create the enabling conditions for the interventions to work sustainable in the longer term. We know it's a continuous challenge with the collaboration between the public and private sector, and also we see that there is a huge challenge in setting up adequate insurance mechanisms within these countries and locations. So I wanted to share just one example of how Thailand used its so-called technology needs assessments, technology action plans developed under the UNFCCC framework, the UN climate change, and how this has been picked up. This was a process led by the government, identifying the need for sustainable infrastructure in the water sector. The whole sort of technology action plan was not only about the infrastructure itself, but included an array of enabling actions that would allow the whole initiative to be sustainable and take a holistic approach, addressing also data, governance issues, and so forth. So through the technology needs assessment process, Thailand identified the need for certain technologies, the need for regulatory frameworks, capacity building needs, and so forth, and joined forces based on this with the Green Climate Fund and the UNDP in forming a project together with support from the Thai government in rolling out such a project. And I think this is really a good example of how to approach it in a comprehensive, holistic manner, ensuring sustainability in the longer term. So on my last slide, before I leave the floor to the panel and the moderator, I'd just like to highlight a few future outlook points. The OECD has estimated that around $6.9 trillion would be needed annually per 2030 for sustainable infrastructure. This is a significant amount, and I think we can all agree that there's a way to go still for us to reach this, not least in terms of implementation and the challenges we're facing in terms of creating the process for it. A large proportion is currently directed towards mitigation. However, there is an increasing recognition that we need to invest in adaptation and in climate resilient infrastructure. There is a higher focus on community-based initiatives and innovative financing mechanisms that are essential to align the public and private investments to the climate resilient needs. We need the effective governance and policy frameworks, meaning that we can addressing these needs are essential. So I will end my presentation here and hand back to you, moderator. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Next, I would like to invite our panelists to the stage to join us. And Sarah, Adonai, Ke, Taeyong, Moritz, please. Right. So Sarah Al-Hardy is the head of partnership at Aqua Power, China, and an executive manager of investment development for Aqua Power Group. She is responsible for managing strategic Saudi-Chinese investment partnerships that drive growth and business expansion. She also serves as a board director at Aqua Power, Sakwa renewable energy company. Sarah successfully led the development and investment in multiple green infrastructure projects in Saudi Arabia, including renewable energy and green hydrogen initiatives. Glad to have you here, Sarah. And the other panelists, let's start here from Moritz. Moritz Wiegel leads the Climate Technology Support and Implementation Team at UNFCCC Secretariat. He supports the intergovernmental agencies' processes in advancing climate technology development and transfer in line with Paris alignment and the priorities identified by developing countries. Prior to UNFCCC, he served as Executive Director of African Energy Now, Managing Director of Africa Rising, and also held various roles at UNDP and UNIDO-focused renewable energy technology development. And Adonai Herrera Martinez. Adonai is the Director of Environment and Sustainability at EBRD. He leads a team responsible for assessing Paris alignment, green finance attribution, and monitoring the impacts of EBRD-financed projects post-signing, as well as driving EBRD's biodiversity and blue economy agenda. From 2017 to 2019, Adonai served as advisor to EBRD president. And since 2009, he has coordinated sustainability efforts for EBRD in Turkey. He's also worked with UNDP in New York and Dakar, and European Council for Nuclear Research in Geneva. And Taeyong Paik is a member of International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB, with over 30 years of experience as academic and policy advisor in accounting and sustainability, both in Korea and internationally. Before joining ISSB, Taeyong was a professor of accounting at Songkyakwon University in Seoul from 1995 to 2022. And previously, he served as assistant professor of accounting at the New York University's Stern School of Business from 1989 to 1994. Ke, sorry to keep you to the last. Ke is from our own team, and he's Director General for the PMD, Portfolio Monitoring Department. The name is a bit deceiving because actually Ke also leads a significant team of experts working on, in particular, private sector operations in the implementation stage. Before joining AIIB, Ke was working in World Bank. So thank you for the wonderful panel joining us. And let's start with the panel discussion. So the first question I would like to propose to the panel is that we've heard the opening from Alberto speaking about AIIB's ambition and the general trend. And we also heard Sarah with excellent elaborations on the trend in green transition and resilient infrastructure. In particular, we heard from you a lot about the challenges and the needs, and you eloquently also laid in place a number of key points on the financing needs, the partnerships, and also additional work needed in products and financing. So turning to our panelists, I would like to start with the first question. Do you think there is a promising trend as well, aside from the challenges and the needs? And speaking from your own background, do you see there's any latest signs? So we would like to start with probably Aqua, as private sector has been leading in a number of these efforts. So Sarah, please.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank AIIB for their hospitality and this great annual meeting. This is my second one, so thank you. We are Aquapower, one of the leading private sector companies when it comes to our business model. We're a developer, investor, and operator for water desalination, power generation, and green hydrogen. We have more than 90 assets, and with a total investment of around $94 billion in our portfolio. And as well, we have green hydrogen as one of our newly added portfolio focus and strategy. Our strategy is to be at the forefront of the transition by looking at how can we deliver reliably, responsibly, at low cost, and at markets like the Global South, where we're really looking at a need for mobilization of private sector and finance. And when it comes to your question about what are the promising trends, climate change for sure is testing the world architecture, and it's testing all of us and our resilience to adapt and to respond to that. When we look at water supply, for instance, there is a huge stress to water supply around the world. We're looking at drought, we're looking at increased water pollution, that are coming from floods, from an increased rainfall. We're looking at contamination of water because of the rising seawater levels that are allowing the fresh waters to be undrinkable. Looking and understanding that only 2.5% of drinkable water and fresh water is composed from the global water supply. So adaptation is definitely vital to meet the world's need, and desalination technology is one of the solutions of these scarcity of water and the problems and the issues of water. In Aquapower, we tapped into the ocean and seawater as a source with huge opportunities to adapt to the climate change impact that we're seeing on water supply. And today, we're the world's largest water desalination operator in the world as a private company. But UNEP and different entities would come and say, but water desalination doesn't come without an impact. And this is the promising trend that I'm happy to tell you and share with you in this panel. Water desalination is energy intensive. It's costly because of the energy intensity. A third of the cost of water desalination cost is coming from energy. And it's fossil fuel based. And what we've been able to do in Aquapower and what private sector is able to do is it has the ability, the unique ability to be nimble, innovative, utilizing engineering for novel design. And we have now around 3 or 4 assets that are water desalination, renewable energy based. So we have the first one, Hassayan project, which is an RERO, renewable energy reverse osmosis technology, that is cost us around $914 million USD. We have another project in Saudi Arabia, Jazla, which is with a total cost of $1.5 billion USD. These are all bankable project financed, non-recourse based projects. And we have as well the Red Sea, the first tourism city in Saudi Arabia that is a multi-utility based project where we've supplied water through renewable energy for that city. So resilient design standards are required. There is a lot of promising innovation that is happening in the sector, in the water desalination, but it requires more collaboration and partnerships from private sector and different other players in the market.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Wonderful points on the private sector ambitions and also undertakings on water and the resilient technology. And let's now move on to our part of the lender community, and maybe Ibiali Adonai. Do you have anything to add on this green transition trend and as a lender perspective?
Perfect. Well, first of all, thank you, Yaning and AIIB colleagues for the kind invitation, and the Uzbek authorities for bringing the annual meeting here to this fairy tale city of Samarkand. It's the second time I'm here. Just as a snapshot of EBRD, for those of you that might not be aware, we are a development bank, just like AIIB, created in 1991 to promote transition to market economies of the former Soviet Union. We operate now in a region from Morocco to Mongolia, from Estonia to Egypt, if that kind of mapping helps, and soon we'll be expanding to Sub-Saharan Africa. We invest about 13 billion euros per year in about 500 projects, okay? Focusing on project finance and private sector. Most of our portfolio is private sector. Green transition is we are a transition bank, so green transition is one of the pillars of our activities, right? But what is green transition? I think we need to first think about defining the problem. Well, a green transition is the one that supports activities that are aligned with environmental sustainability, especially aligned with the objectives of the Paris Agreement, both mitigation and adaptation, and also with the objectives of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. We cannot forget nature. It's an integral part of promoting a green transition. Let's look into challenges, right? On mitigation, I think we're not there yet, but we have a clear path towards achieving the Paris alignment goals, especially 2050 net zero targets, right? We have clarity of objectives through net zero targets, a functioning market, especially for power, that is based on a tradable commodity, electricity in the case of power. And we have a clear impact metric, which is CO2 emission savings, or CO2 emissions in general. And that's the reason why today 80% of the installed capacity in the world is actually renewable energy. This is EIA, International Energy Agency numbers, right? It's not by chance, and it's not by altruism. Most companies are investing in renewables because it makes sense. So now the challenge actually is how to decommission fossil fuel plants, how to take offline those plants that are operating purely on the marginal cost as compared to full investment cost, right? On nature, and especially on climate resilience and adaptation, that's not the case, right? Not the case because they are context-specific as investments. So different locations have different exposures and vulnerabilities to climate change. There's multiple metrics, okay, depending on the context as well and on the nature of the projects. And there's a clear market failure. Climate risks and nature risks are rarely translated into economic terms. We don't price climate risks and we don't price nature correctly, if ever we price those global commons, right? And the challenge in resilience is that it relies on a hypothetical counterfactual. That is, we are looking to the likelihood of an event to cause a damage into our investment, right? It might happen, it might not. We might have not enough memory to actually connect the dots together. So all these are negative points, but we also need to look into the positive sides of and how the market is evolving, right? And I will close here. I don't want to take too much time, but methodologically, we have new approaches to climate resilience. In particular in EBRD, from the credit perspective, we assess climate risks, both physical climate risks and carbon transition risks. And this is something we apply when we finance our projects with our colleagues from Aqua. We look at the counterparty risk in the case of credit risk, but we also look at the project-related risks when we look at Paris alignment, and we make sure that our projects are actually adapted to the risk and vulnerability that are specific for those technologies and those locations where we invest, right? And also, we try to promote, we finance about 50% of our finance is green finance. Most of it is mitigation, but very often we have adaptation and nature side benefits. And we try to promote and enhance projects that actually support and enable systemic adaptation goals, right? And that's on methodologies. And finally, on new products, there's emerging products that now are starting to focus on impacts of those products. And I want to refer to, for example, sustainability-linked products that through key performance indicators link project performance with expected outcomes. And that's quite interesting for mitigation, of course, but especially for adaptation and for nature. We can set KPIs in our lending and compensate borrowers through SLBs, sustainability-linked bonds or linked loans, with a step down if they achieve their targets, or penalize those if they don't achieve those targets and they are excessively exposed to climate change, for example. So just to wrap up, the market is picking up, and there's a systematic trend to incorporate climate risk in the credit risk assessment that we do on climate.
Thanks so much, Adonai. And next, I would like to turn to Moritz. And we've heard this private sector project sponsor and also the MDB financiers. So do you have any input from the UNFCCC's perspective, since you have been always in the front line working on with countries setting the targets?
Thank you, Yanning. And I'd also like to start by appreciating the hospitality of the government of Uzbekistan and the AIIB hosting us here in the beautiful city of Samarkand. To your question, so I'll take a global perspective. And from that point of view, it is very encouraging to see the increased commitment and also interest across the finance landscape on adaptation, and then particularly also on resilient infrastructure. And I think this accounts not only for the AIIB, but really across MDBs, which is indeed very encouraging. In addition, from a technology perspective, we see globally great advances on innovative and technological solutions that can really help drive adaptation across the globe, also in the area of infrastructure, and that these solutions also become increasingly affordable. However, there is also a challenge in terms of connecting this growing supply side with the demand of developing countries in terms of their national priorities and needs in the area of resilient infrastructure and adaptation. And what I highlight here is that, of course, as you all know, there are the national determined contributions, in short NDCs, that all signatories to the Paris Agreement have submitted and continue to update, and that those national climate plans include specifics on adaptation and mitigation in terms of target and plans that the countries have agreed on through very comprehensive national processes. But then often those NDCs stay at a very high and general level. And that is a challenge from a project point of view that you as an MDB would be taking. Now, ultimately, when we talk about adaptation or resilient infrastructure, it comes down to technology. And what is lesser known is that under the UNFCCC, and I'm very glad that Sarah already alluded to it in her keynotes, there is a process that countries undertake, which is resulting in technology action plans. And these nationally endorsed technology action plans are actually very specific in nature in many cases. So they go down to the project level. They include national priority projects, in some cases also project ideas. And just to give you a few numbers on where we stand on this. So to date, there are more than 100 developing countries who have gone through these national processes of developing these technology action plans. And those have resulted in about 600 such plans with a total investment need of $25 billion. Now, in addition to these $25 billion, there's a very concrete articulation of national priority projects that include, many of which include infrastructure projects, include adaptation projects, and those priority projects, in addition to the 25 billion, have a total investment need of about 36 billion. So this is like a 61 billion portfolio, if you will, that is out there on the table and waiting for MDBs and others to be picked up on in many cases. So there's an opportunity here also coming directly out of the UNFCCC process that I wanted to leave you with here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Moritz. And it's promising to learn that the countries are already working very closely with UNFCCC on the technology assessment. And next, I would like to move to Taeyong. And Taeyong, so what do you see, how do you see the development on the ISSB standards could help with this green transition path?
I'm very honored to be here to share my view representing ISSB. So I'm one of 3 board members representing Asia-Ocean regions out of 14 members. And this ISSB, International Sustainability Standard Board, was created 2.5 years ago under International Financial Reporting Standard Foundation, which used to make international accounting standard for many years, which are used by 140 countries globally, including European area, and maybe exception is US and some other country. And we started our board merging Integrated Reporting Council and also SASB Standard Board, Sustainability Accounting Standard Board, and also Climate Disclosure Standard Board, CDSB. And also we took over the role of TCFD, Task Force of Climate-Related Financial disclosure. So, because we issued S2 standard, which is kind of extension of TCFD recommendation. So one big change you may see within 5 years is coming of new era of sustainability disclosure. So now we have mostly voluntary disclosure by reporting entity using like GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, ISO or TCFD or SASB standards so far. But in the new era, we'll have mandatory disclosure required by the jurisdictional regulators, like Ministry of Finance in China and other financial regulators, or sometimes the stock exchange ask for mandatory disclosure. And now we say there are there are 3 or 4 major disclosure standards. If you count GRI, it's 4. But we have a new so-called ESRS, European Sustainability Reporting Standard, made by EFRAG, starting this year. So in some of the European countries, they have to make first report based on ESRS from next year. And also US SEC is working on their own first climate-related standard, but there are some political dispute. So we'll see what happens in coming presidential election. So it depending on who will become a president, they will have different speed. But ESRS and SEC covers only their own territory, US and EU. In other countries, we see basically they use our standard. They make their own standard based on IFRS standard. Japan declared that they will fully adopt our standard, and UK is doing that too. So we assume that other than US and EU, all the other countries will make their own mandatory disclosure requirement based on our standard. That's why our role is quite important. So having this mandatory disclosure, coming with mandatory assurance, with high assurance standard made probably by IAASB, this reporting entity feel more pressure for their transition effort. Whether it's mitigation or adaptation, they have to report what kind of transition plan they have in their strategy disclosure part. So that will be big pressure for the reporting entity changing their actions.
Thank you, Taeyong. We've heard from the opening and also keynote speech by Sarah that the financing needs in general is massive. And probably no one can act alone and help turn around the world single-handedly. So I would just throw an open question to all of the panel members. So what do you see is your particular role in such a green transition? And do you see any good examples of successful partnerships? And how could such partnerships be further strengthened? And let's start again with Sarah from Aqua. Again.
Thank you so much for the question, and I think it's an important question about the role of the private sector in the green transition and the importance of partnership. So in Aqua Power, already 80% of our portfolio is decarbonized. And in addition to our focus on renewable energy, which is 50% of our portfolio, and water desalination, green hydrogen plays an integral role into our strategy as we look at it as the fuel for the future, and it's emerging as a solution to the transition from fossil fuels to a more sustainable fuel. In green hydrogen, we are coined as one of the first movers when it comes to adopting green hydrogen. We've worked on the world's largest green hydrogen facility in NEOM in Saudi Arabia with 8.5 billion USD of financing of cost for that project. Low emission fuels are becoming increasingly important, especially for the hard to abate sectors where electrification cannot play a role. And we see that in most of the net zero plans, we need to ramp up the current contribution of low emission fuels, which accounts for 1% to 5%. By 2050. And partnership is a really important part of any success story. And in Aqua Power, we go beyond thinking about a plant as a plant or an asset as an asset. We think about the impact that it can create. And I think case in point is us being here in Uzbekistan. And honestly, coming here, this is my first time here in Samarkand, and genuinely I feel the story of the transformation of Uzbekistan is very much reminiscent of the story of transformation in Saudi Arabia. We both have Vision 2030, which is spearheaded by a leadership that has a foresight and a really forward-looking future. And I take this opportunity to thank President Shafkat Mirziyoyev and the Minister of Energy, Jorabek Mirza Mahmudov, and Minister of Investment, Laziz Qudrato, because they've created the enabling conditions for private sector to work here in Uzbekistan. And we are one of these companies that is working and creating success stories in Uzbekistan. And our partnership goes to looking at new technologies, such as green hydrogen, wind that is more efficient, storage that is being deployed at massive levels. And in green hydrogen, we've partnered with local partners here in Uzbekistan, with Oski Masanat, where we work together on a groundbreaking project of 3,000 tons of green ammonia that already started construction. And it's only possible because of the different partners that we were able to bring together, whether it be it from a local partnership and this chemical leader in Uzbekistan, the DFIs that came and supported for the first time green hydrogen, which is a new technology, a fairly new technology. And it's because of the trust and the agility that we're able to create. And more than that, going beyond the asset, what's beautiful is the human capability building that we really care about in the green transition, meaning that looking at building green skills, green jobs. And here in Uzbekistan, we have a Shireen College sponsored by Aqua Power, where we have 350 students who are being prepared to be the task force for the future. And that's, I think, the most important, valuable impact on how you're changing not only the ecosystem when it comes to the technology and greening it, but as well the livelihood of the people around it. And I think answering your question, how to do that successfully and what are the elements of a successful partnership, I would say that as an impact investor, we look for bold movers like us who are willing to come and invest in new countries with new technologies. And as an investor, we hold hand with other partners, and we look at how we're giving them the comfort that they need to come to new technologies. And we look for not only in terms of the energy trilemma, affordability, sustainability, and security, but as well speed, which is part of the energy quadrilemma. Thank you.
Learn these are the wonderful developments between public and the private sector. So next, I would like to turn to Adonai. So, oh. Good.
Thank you. I want to start for thanking AIIB because I come from AIIB, but I want to say thank you to the audience here. Thank you for attending this session. AIIB, as you know, is same as EBRD, Multilateral Development Bank. Although we are only 9 years old, we've been actually doing quite well. Now we have approved the 226 projects, totaling $55 billion. And among them, we treat climate investment and green infrastructure very important investment priority for us. And as of now, we already achieved the 50% green financing, in terms of total annual approvals. And 100% of our projects are Paris Agreement aligned since last year. As other panelists already mentioned, of course, most of our climate investment actually on mitigation. But we seeing more and more demand from a client side on adaptation, from simply, safeguarding the critical infrastructure, like transport, network, transmissions, energy, all these, infrastructure investment. Now we actually, our teams are doing climate risk assessment for all those projects. Make sure that, the adaptation is addressed. For example, for the local roads network project here in Uzbekistan, we included, based on the climate risk assessment, we included a lot of adaptation measurements into the design and the implementation. For example, the heat resistance pavement, right? The better drainage system, and also, these freeze raw cycle materials to ensure that, the extreme temperature change will not result in, damage to our roads. So those already being included. And in addition to that, we are now also seeing demand for adaptation-focused project, like, the investment into the coastal infrastructure. We are doing a project in Maldives, particularly focusing on building seawalls, flood barriers to kind of, address the potential impact by the rising sea levels and, extreme weather, etc. And then more and more projects also taking into consideration the natural-based solution, as Sarah suggested, like, natural-based drainage system, right? Utilizing lakes and, the ponds, rather than building, the pipes to collect the additional water, excessive water, and the biological, slope management measures, right, to help protect the roads and the important infrastructure, etc. So we do see more and more investment opportunities. Yanni, you asked about how to do that. As MDB, I think EBRD and us play a critical role. Of course, private sector is the doer, right? But the MDBs can actually capitalize our investment by leveraging our financial resource, technical expertise, as well as global influence, right? To help bring more, particularly more private capital into adaptation infrastructure. We can, do this, attract more private capital through many approach, right? By, for example, blending our concessional finance, co-financing together with the private investments by supporting the development of the green bond market, ESG bond market. In fact, the AIIB supported several these projects to promote the capital market development with the focus on the green bonds and the ESG bonds. And we also directly support the issuance of, climate bond. So by doing this, to actually crowding more money into these very, very important investment areas. I think I will pause here. Thank you, Yanni.
Thanks, Adonai, for reminding us. Adonai, could you please?
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure. I wanted to listen to the examples from the AIIB before I intervene, so thank you for that. I used to have a professor of financial accounting that used to say that accounting is really, really simple. You just need to repeat the words really slowly to understand the meaning. And I think with the role of multilaterals, which is your question, is a bit like that. We're multilateral development banks. So the answer to your question lies on each one of the three words, right? As multilaterals, we need to do exactly this, serve as platforms to share best practices between us, and also with clients and with other financial institutions. So that is a key role from our side, right? And help clients develop transition plans or decarbonization plans to achieve the 2050 objectives, right? As development banks, we need to consider everyone, and particularly the most vulnerable, especially on climate resilience, right? Because both climate is affecting much more people that are more vulnerable across our countries, and also, yes, they affect the vulnerable people, and then very often they contribute, vulnerable communities contribute the most to the economic cycles that carve into the impacts of climate change. And I think we had a very good example yesterday from the gentleman from the Maharashtra Institute of Technology that provided an example with attacks of tigers on women picking up wood around the reserves where tigers were, right? By addressing the issue of fuel, you actually help preserve the natural capital and avoid the impact of tiger attacks. Like it's a roundabout example, but again, looking at the vulnerable communities is essential in the development mandate. And third, but not least, a bank. We need to provide capital for projects and take more risk, be additional and take more risks that conventional financial institutions and pilot and test. Some projects might not go right, but the idea is actually to understand what works. And we have several examples. You asked for examples, Janine. We finance nature-based solutions in the refurbishment of River Big, for example, in Moldova, in Chisinau, the capital, where we use nature actually to adapt and to build resilience for the increasing amount of floods around Chisinau, right? But we also have a couple of very nice examples of partnerships as well that I typically use. For the last 20 years, we've been, the government of Finland created a partnership, the Northern Dimension Environmental Partnership, that was, hosted in EBRD, that systematically invested in simple wastewater treatment plants. But that ultimately and collectively had an impact in the recovery of the Baltic ecosystem. The Baltic ecosystem doesn't have, is not vulnerable to climate change yet. But right now, what we've done is to replicate that successful example in the Baltic around the Mediterranean Sea, around the Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, and that is an area that is much more vulnerable. And in fact, we've kindly invited the government of Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to also become a partner and a donor in that Blue Mediterranean Partnership. And last but not least, we work to develop capacity both of our governments and our clients. And I think Sarah was very kind, because yesterday we spoke and we were preparing. She was giving constructive feedback, but she was very kind not to share this with the audience now. But indeed, we need to work with our partners in improving, in building capacity, not just on environmental social standards, but also in integrating the assessment of climate risk and implementing those measures. So, because ultimately our goal as multilateral development banks is to deliver positive impact at systemic level. That is, to make sure that once we remove our operations, the system keeps applying best practices in finance.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Adonai. So, Moritz, any additional points on partnership?
Yes, sure. So from the global level again, if you read the Paris Agreement, you'll see that it has very much at its heart the spirit of partnership and collaboration. And I think there's a very clear recognition that delivering on this agreement cannot happen without the help of many actors and partnership across different domains and areas. And I think this panel is a good example of this. So everyone comes with their specific strengths to the table, and it can only happen, and we can only move the needle on the green transition or on the Paris Agreement if there is collaboration and partnership in the room. And I think there are many valid points that have been raised already by my fellow panelists, and just to maybe underline one or two, and then I'll also have an invitation. If we think about it at the global level, I think this is clear from the policy perspective what is happening and what needs to happen. But then if we look down at the project level, which your first question was about, of course things become much more complicated. And it is not only about individual projects, but actually systemic changes, as Adonai just alluded to. So all those enabling environments that need to be in place for projects actually to happen and to happen sustainably. And I think that's where partnerships are absolute key. So you have different actors who can support advances in policy, in enabling environments, but then also bringing down capital costs in developing country, bringing down or addressing risks, which are often a main barrier to the implementation, to the uptake of climate technologies across the world very much. So partnerships are absolutely vital and needed. Now, from our side, or in our role as a global convener, as UNFCCC Secretariat, we've also started working on facilitating these types of partnerships, and we've engaged also, started engaging with MDBs more specifically since their positive response to that COP27 decision back then 2 years ago, including the AIIB, on what can we do to facilitate partnerships towards climate action, in our case, or from the part of the organization where I come from, on climate technologies. And there have been some, I think, very interesting initial discussions how that could look like, bridging that gap from having in place those technology action plans that I mentioned earlier to actually investment-ready projects, and how to get there. And I hope that we can continue this discussion also at the next COP in Baku with AIIB and others. And there's just one thing that I wanted to leave you with in terms of opportunity for partnerships. So on the technology side, under the UNFCCC, there was a very clear recognition from the global stocktake on the Paris Agreement last year that there's a lack of investment in climate technologies. And in response to that, one of the most concrete outcomes of this global stocktake was actually the establishment of a so-called technology implementation program under the Paris Agreement. Now, this program is currently being shaped. It will be on the negotiation table in Baku. And I think this is an opportunity to step forward, to show leadership in climate finance, to think of co-creating new solutions with the financial mechanism of the UNFCCC, but also with other MDBs who are already engaged in this area. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Moritz, and thanks for highlighting the upcoming Baku event. And so, Taeyong, any particular points from ISSB on the partnership?
Yes, actually, partnership is one of the major critical success factors for our operation. So first of all, as I mentioned, there will be 3 or 4 major disclosure standards. So we are working very closely with AFRAC for ESRS and also SEC and GRI for so-called interoperability, meaning that maximum harmonization of all different standards. And luckily, ESRS and SEC requirement and also our standards are based on TCFD framework, having 4 pillars of governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. So that's why there are high level of alignment already built in. And also we are working closely with the preparers and users include MDB as well as private financial institutions in buy side and sell side. And they are providing consultation and advisory support in the process of standard setting, also implementation. And because we are trying to provide global baseline to be used by the users, having globally comparable and reliable information. And also we are working with the regulators, like jurisdictional finance regulators, like Ministry of Finance in many countries, and also IOSCO, which is a global organization of all these financial regulators. Also, we are working closely with security exchanges because they are helping us for implementation and also for capacity building. So there is a so-called sustainability stock exchanges having a big education program right now. So we develop education material together. I was involved in a project. And also we are working closely with the GFANS and UK Transition Plan Task Force for transition plan disclosure especially. And also we a high level involvement in the GHG protocol because they are very critical actually measuring GHG emission figures. And also, we are working for CDP for data alignment. It's great news that CDP decided to use our climate change requirement in their questionnaire. So basically, they are asking same question in their questionnaire. So their database on climate change will be based on our requirement. And the most importantly, we are working with MDB, including AIIB, World Bank, and so on, every MDB in the whole world, because they can help us. I mean, they can use our information for their own disclosure, and also they can use this kind of information for their investment decision, because they need risk analysis and so on. And also, we are working some of MDB to create some capacity building program for different regions. So, so we have a lot of collaboration going on right now. We may expand more. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Taeyong. And I'm conscious of time for this session, and so we roughly have close to 7 minutes to go. And so maybe we could open the floor and open the questions to the floor. And any questions from the floor? I would like to initiate one question. So, Ke, you talked about these AIIB investments, but following up on what Moritz spoke about, the need to work more closely with the countries, and I guess that would imply some need for collaboration or discussion on the policy level as well. Do you see any opportunities for AIIB to play more roles on that end. Because the previous seminar, there was one reference to AIIB being the project bank. So over to you.
Thank you, Yanni. As my EBRD colleague Adone already pointed out, multilateral development bank like us, our support to our client countries is, not just about the financing project, goes much beyond that. And I think we do play a critical role to facilitate the partnership, right, with and between government and the private sector. I see that's very important in order to achieve that, systematic kind of approach to climate or any other development agenda. I think for AIIB now, there is a very good opportunity because our board recently just approved a new financing instrument for us. That's a climate-based policy lending. Climate-focused policy-based lending. It's a little bit long name, CPPF. Meaning that now we can actually work with our client countries to provide financing and also policy advice, technical assistance to help them, address the policy level issues, to improve the policy regulatory framework, which I think the private sector and all other development partners are looking for, right, to address climate, particularly, I think, adaptation altogether. Yeah. Thank you, Yanni.
Thank you. Thank you, Ke. I see one hand, and could anyone pass the mic to this lady over there?
Yes, may I have a question to Aqua Power, Sarah? Yes, and this is Cecily from China Energy Engineering. And actually, we know that recently, Aqua Power has been at the forefront of the green and low carbon transition. And just as you mentioned, you're expanding the business of the emerging field, like the hydrogen, also energy, electricity storage. And as we know that such cutting edge or emerging technology don't have a mature business mode. So how do you do the decision making to balance the new technology and the low cost? As previously you just mentioned that your main concern of such field is reliability and low cost. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question, and pleasure to have you. China Energy is one of our partners, and we work extensively in China and around the world. I think to answer your question, indeed, Aqua Power is looking at different means of deploying innovative technologies in our projects. Mind you that any project that we do, it has to be bankable, which means that we don't need only to convince our shareholders, but as well our financing institutions that are working with us. We work with AIIB, with EBRD, which means that we have extensive level of advisors that comes on board and look at each and every technology. And for us to deliver low cost, high standards, we engage all of our suppliers. And again, it goes back to the partnership point. We work with our suppliers, we work with our EPCs into looking into means of optimizing our solutions. And we have in-house our own engineering capabilities. We're not a passive investor. We're very active investor. We work on ground, we work with our partners to ensure that we deliver robust solution that delivers value to our shareholders and to our clients and our partners.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. And I don't see any more hands, so I would like to reserve the last 1.5 minutes to our panelists. So let's say if you want to highlight or summarize your message in only 2 words, what are these 2 words you would like to leave it with our audience? So I would like to start with Sarah again.
I think 2 points quickly. Stewardship and ESG focused, and making sure that we look at triple bottom line, not only at profit.
Thank you. Thank you. Adonai.
Yes, thank you, Yanning. As things come in groups of three, I'll use 3 words instead of 2 to answer 3 questions. Why, how, and who, for who, right? Why we need to be focused, that is, have clear objectives and finance towards the achievement of those objectives. How? Through innovation. So focus innovative, because we have a dynamic baseline towards the net zero objectives. We need to innovate and test ideas. And finally, it has to be equitable. We need to promote a just transition and be very clear on why do we invest and for who, right? So focus, innovative, and equitable.
Thanks, Adonai. Yeah. So, Taeyong.
Thank you. I say transparency and accountability for sustainability activity. That's what disclosure tried to achieve. And also, I forgot to tell, we really appreciate that AIIB declared voluntary adoption of our standard coming next year, showing their big dedication for their work. So, congratulations.
Thank you, Taeyong. Moritz?
I'll keep it at 1 word, excitement. Excitement because there is the capital, the technology, and the willingness, at least here in the room, but also out there, to address the climate crisis together and to do this in a just way. So the just transition aspect, I think I also want to highlight here. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. Actually, it's 2 words, excitement and Ke.
2 words. Can I have 4 words?
You're pushing.
Very simple. Let's do it together.
Thank you. Let's go. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think that would bring us to the closure of this wonderful panel discussion. And thanks for joining us. And please enjoy the rest of the day.